Okay, we wanted to get back on schedule because since everybody has to now go through a lunch line with a cashier, and we want to be back in time at what time do you want to be back at 1 o'clock? At 1 o'clock, we want to turn to those people who signed up to make public comment, and we have two people who have signed up. Michael Carome from Public Citizen and Susan Ekajuba from GHEP Incorporated. So Michael, you have 5 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Director of Public Citizens Health Research Group, and I would like to address two topics. The first is the need for IRBs to be skeptical when investigators assert that their randomized trials are limited to standard of care interventions, and secondly, the OHP draft guidance. This workshop was prompted by the controversy surrounding the NIH-funded support study involving premature infants. Ironically, support, contrary to assertions made by many of its defenders and to statements made in most of the IRB-approved consent forms, was not an example of standard of care or usual care research. Support was a complex experiment in which premature infants were randomly assigned to low or high oxygen targets and additionally to one of two ventilation strategies. Many of the support study's experimental interventions significantly deviated from usual care in the non-research setting. For some of these interventions, this was obvious from a review of the protocol. For example, the use of oxygen monitors with masking algorithms that resulted in displayed readings that were either falsely low or falsely high, when actual levels were between 85 and 95%, represented an extraordinary deviation from usual care in the non-research setting, particularly since oxygen levels play a role in many important clinical decisions related to adjustment of oxygen therapy and whether to intubate or extubate infants. Likewise, half the infants in the support study were assigned to an experimental ventilatory strategy that combined early use of continuous positive airway pressure masks with severe criteria for intubation and extubation designed to force infants off mechanical ventilation that the investigators themselves characterized as outside the bounds of usual care. For other interventions in this protocol, such as the two oxygen targets, it was not clear from the protocol itself whether these did indeed constitute standard of care. In collaboration with researchers at NIH Clinical Center, we conducted a systematic literature search to identify all publications describing intended and achieved oxygen levels in usual care NICU settings from 1990 to the present. We compared the usual care oxygen levels to the intended and achieved levels in support and 4 other similar trials conducted around the world. We found that the upper 89% limit of the low oxygen target in the 5 trials was far lower than the upper limit of target ranges used during usual care at nearly all NICUs reporting what they did in usual care, and that was 92 to 100%. During usual care, the use of relatively low bottom-end saturation limits, as low as 85%, was universally paired with upper saturation limits of 92% or greater, creating a wide range. Additional analyses show that the randomization to the low oxygen target in these trials resulted in protocol-driven, achieved saturations substantially below those seen during usual care, with infants enrolled in the trial spending substantially more time below saturation levels of 85%, thus exposing them to hypoxia in comparison to usual care. The support study provides key lessons for IRBs when researchers claim to be studying usual care or standard of care interventions. IRBs must be skeptical of and demand that researchers provide robust evidence for these assertions. This is critically important for studies of life-threatening conditions where basic interventions such as oxygen therapy may be life-saving and protocol-driven changes in their administration can have serious consequences. A thorough review of available literature, combined with detailed surveys of usual practice and appropriately designed pilot studies, can provide such information. These easily achievable steps would have shown investigators and IRBs that the oxygen interventions in the support study and the 4 other trials around the world has designed markedly differed from usual care. Any report from this workshop would be incomplete without addressing this issue. Regarding the OHP guidance, while the guidance on disclosing risks in research evaluating standard of care needs better clarity, the allegation by some that it violates the spirit and letter of the Belmont Report principles lacks merit. Dr. Menikoff, as you heard, eloquently articulated the guidance's core concept and underlying ethical rationale. Those familiar with the Belmont Report will understand that the guidance faithfully adheres to the ethical principle of respect for persons, which demands that subjects enter into research voluntarily and with adequate information. Alternative interventions commonly used in usual care routinely differ in their known and suspected risks and advantages. For research involving random assignment to such alternative interventions, voluntary consent is not possible.
I'm sorry, could you wrap up? Because
without
your
fully
time is up.
disclosing these risks and advantages.
Good. Oh, perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. And then Susan Ekajuba, are you here? Okay. Well, in that case, we have bought an extra 90 seconds to get to lunch. And I thank everybody for their participation and see you at 1 o'clock.